Okay, so I'm going to go over now how to choose a method for solving a quadratic equation. And the truth of the matter is, when you're trying to figure out what the answer, or the two answers to the quadratic equation, there's basically three different things that you can do. The first thing is you can try to factor it, and that's what I highly recommend you try to do first. If it becomes too difficult for you, then what you can do is you can try completing the square. And how you complete the square will depend on if your leading coefficient is in the number in front of the x squared, or the y squared, if that's the case, is 1. And if the leading coefficient is not 1, like maybe it's 2 or 4 or 5, whichever one it is. So that's your step 2. If you see that that becomes too difficult, or maybe you're not that comfortable with it, you can go ahead and go to the third step, which is just go ahead and find your A, your B, and your C when you look at your quadratic equation in standard form. Plug it into the formula and get your two answers, and you're done. So I want to go over two examples, and I'm going to try and show you to go through the whole thing. Maybe you have a favorite one. Maybe, first you try the zeros and you say, you know what, I'm not too comfortable with completing the square, so I'm going to go straight to the quadratic formula. Keep in mind, you got to memorize it, because on the SAT or any large test you're going to have, they're going to expect you to memorize it. So you do have to memorize. That's the downside. Now, for completing the square, it's just a few more steps. And you do have to remember that it's slightly different when you have 1 as the leading coefficient, or a number other than 1 as the leading coefficient. So let's go ahead and let's start it. Okay, so we're going to start with this one here. And this is x squared plus 7x plus 6 equals 0. Okay, so I'm going to try, and I'm going to start with pencil, and then I'll go over with a pen. I'm going to make my two parentheses, because my first go is I'm going to try to factor. All right, so here goes. I'm going to take this, and I'm going to take this. X and X. And this is simple because there's no leading coefficient here. So this is actually a really good candidate to factor. All right. Now, I have to remember that this number here, that's 6. I have to find two numbers that when I multiply, give me 6, and when I add them, give me positive 7. Okay, so let me think of 6. Well, okay, 2 times 3 gives me 6, but when I add 2 and 3, I don't get 7. So let me try, if I try 3 times 2, same difference. Ooh, watch out. 6 then could be 1 times 6. And lo and behold, 1 times 6 is 1 plus 6 is equal to 7. That works. And look what I have. I can put plus 1 plus 6 equal to 0. All right, and then with this, all I have to do is I have to realize that by making what's in here equal to 0, when I multiply it by this, it's going to give 0. And when I make how do I make whatever's in here inside the parentheses turn to 0? We'll make the whole thing become 0. That's why we call it finding the zeros, also finding the solution. So I'm going to cut this into two pieces. X plus 1 equals 0. X plus 6 equals 0. I subtract 1 on both sides. X equals negative 1. That's a possible answer. Negative 6, negative 6. What I do to one side, I do to the other. It has to be balanced. X is equal to negative 6. And those are my two solutions. And I'm done. That would work perfectly. But let's say you're not very good at factoring. You don't like to factor that much. And so you're going to complete the square. You didn't get it. Maybe you get stuck and you just couldn't figure out the factor. That happens too sometimes when it's not super straightforward. So let me do complete the square. I'm going to write it here. Complete the square. Okay? Now, if I have to complete the square here, okay, well, let's see. I'm going to write x squared plus 7x, all right, equal to, now, let me start. This is plus 6, and that's a 0. To complete the square, I'm going to move that 6 over. Okay? That will give me x squared plus 7x. 6 minus 6 will go to 0, canceled out, and this is negative 6. Now, this has a coefficient of 1. The leading coefficient is 1. What's the leading coefficient? The number in front of the highest power variable. There's no number there. That leading coefficient is 1. Now, here's the part you have to remember. And I'm going to put it here. If the leading coefficient is 1, to find out what goes here, you have to take b over 2 squared. If that leading coefficient was something that's not 1, it would be something slightly different. It would actually be b squared over 4a. This is when that coefficient is not equal to 1, and this is when it's equal to 1. This is equal to 1. So we're going to go ahead and take b divided by 2 squared. Now, well, quick review. What's a? What's b? What's c? The leading coefficient is your a. The x to the 1 power in a quadratic equation is your b. And right here would be 6. That would be your c, but we moved it over. So here's my a, and there's my b. So my b is 7. Okay, so I'm going to take 7 over 2 squared. Okay, that would give me 49 over 2. I'm sorry, over 4. My bad. 49 over 4. Okay, I'm going to put plus 49 over 4. Plus 49 over 4. I added it over here. I have to add it on the other side as equal sign. It's like a balance. You got to keep the same balance. Okay, so what's the perfect square? Well, x plus, you see what we had here before we squared it? 7 over 2. 7 over 2 squared equals. Now here, that negative 6 is, if I were to place it with a denominator of 4, what's 6 times 4? 6 times 4 is 24. So that's actually negative 24 over 4. When I divide 24 divided by 4, remember fractions are fancy for division. 24 divided by 4 is 6. Negative 24 divided by 4, negative 6. Plus 49 over 4. All right. X plus 7 over 2 squared. This gives me 25 over 4. Remember, when we have a negative and a positive, it's subtraction. It's almost like I have $49. I take away 24. I'm left with $25. Because I had more to begin with, right? And then the denominator, we do not add them because they're just, you just add the numerators or subtract the numerators in this case. 25 divided by 4. Okay, so we're going to take the square root of both sides. Okay, take the square root. We get x plus 7 over 2, right? That gets rid of the square, plus or minus the square root of 25 over 4. And that is x plus 7 over 2 plus or minus. This, you have to treat it as if it's square root of 25 over square root of 4, which is 5 over 2. Okay? And now I'm going to subtract. It may be a little hard to see. Let me put this up a little bit. 7 over 2 minus 7 over 2 minus 7 over 2. Okay? All right. This cancels. And my answer is x is, okay. Well, we're going to have to actually have 2 answers here. Let me see if I need a separate paper for this. Let me go ahead and grab another paper. So I'm going to continue this here. All right, and just so you can see it. All right, so we were here. Let me rewrite it. X plus 7 over 2 equals plus or minus 5 over 2. Okay, now I'm going to subtract 7 over 2 minus 7 over 2. All right, this cancels. X equals plus or minus 5 over 2 minus 7 over 2. I'm going to start with, this has to be broken up into 2 pieces because there's a plus or minus. 5 over 2 minus 7 over 2, that's the plus. And then the minus 5 over 2 minus 7 over 2. I have to do that because it's going to affect how the subtraction goes. Okay, so 5 minus 7 is negative 2 over 2, which is negative 1. And negative 5 minus 7 is negative 12 divided by 2, which is negative 6. And if you'll notice, those are my 2 x's. X is equal to this, x is equal to that. Let's go back here. If you look at our original, right? There it is. Same answer. So you're not going to lose anything if you try to factor and it comes out. If it comes out correctly, if you did it correctly, when you complete the square, you're going to get the same answer. Now, just to show you, now I'm going to show you what happens if we would have used the quadratic equation. Okay? So again, I'm not going to use this paper just yet. Okay, that's for another video. Let's do the quadratic equation. All right, here goes. So we're going to start this all over again. X squared plus 7x plus 6 equals 0. Let's use the quadratic equation. Okay, for the quadratic equation, you need to first identify your A, your B, your C. And let me use different colors for that. So my A will be red, my B, it looks like black, but anyway, my B equals blue, and my C, I'm gonna make it green. Okay, green. So C is green. All right, so here we go. My A is red. That's a leading coefficient, and there's no number there, so it's 1. My B, right here, the one with the x to the 1, the second term in a quadratic equation in standard form. And the last one is the number here, right? And those are my 3 terms. Okay. Did I do that in green, in red? It should be in green. My bad. Let me erase this. I'm going to make that in green. Okay, that's the constant there. All right. So that's my A, that's my B, and that's my C. Now here's the issue. You have to remember the quadratic formula, the quadratic equation. And once you get it, though, you can find the answer to anything. Right? And some people like to do that. They like to memorize and say, okay, I'm just going to use that. Got to be careful with your negatives. That'll get you every single time. Okay, so the negative B is 7 plus or minus square root. What's my B squared? 7 squared minus 4, all the constants are in black. Not constants, but the non-changing parts. 4a, what's my A? 1. And then C is 6. Okay? All over 2 times A, which is 1. Cool. Now, let's see what happens. So now that we know where everything goes, let's do this. We are going to get negative 7 plus or minus 7 squared is 7 times 7, which is 49, minus 4 times 1 times 6. Now remember, we multiply before we start subtracting. That's where order of operations is important. We got to figure this out. 49, 4 times 1 times 6. Okay, that is 24 all over 2. Okay, so it's negative 7 plus or minus 49 minus 24 is 25 divided by 2. Okay, that's negative 7 plus or minus 5 divided by 2. So this is going to have 2 answers. It's going to be negative 7 plus 5 divided by 2, or it's going to be negative 7 minus 5 divided by 2. And we get negative 2 divided by 2, which is negative 1. And we get negative 12 divided by 2, which is negative 6. Ta-da! We get the exact same answer. And so you can see, if we use the quadratic formula, we get negative 1, negative 6. If we complete the square, right, with this one, right, when we complete the square, we get negative 1, negative 6. And if we factor, we get negative 1, negative 6. All 3 should work and give you the exact same answer if you do them correctly. And good luck. So that's your first example.